I don't know if I have the correct word.
All right, we're ready to go. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's the Newtown Square Finance Committee meeting for February 15th, 2023. We need to do a roll call. Ms. Pascal,
Here.
Mr. Skucas. Did I get that right? Here. Skucas, that's right, Skucas, good. We have absent, we have Larry Fisher and Scott's last name? Trotter. Great. Okay, we need to do we also have John Weaver, Sherry Smythe, Township Manager Steve Neese, Steve Bradley. Thank you. We need to do a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of this agenda. Any comments? I see no comments. Therefore, motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No opposed. Agenda passes. Public comment? Anybody online outside? We don't do. Got it. Okay, we will move to the minutes. Consider approving the minutes for the January 18, 2023 meeting of the Finance Committee. Are there any comments regarding the minutes? Motion. I apologize. Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, okay. Any negative? No. Are there any comments related to those minutes? Great. Those minutes were approved. Reports, I'm going to throw the ball over to you, Steve.
So what I want to share with you today isn't so much financial report, so to speak, but more of where we are with some of the outlying things that people don't always think about in the township. And so we received back our pension report information for the last year, and what we would expect from most of that is that our pensions were down. Our pensions were down about 16%. Our pension funds,
This is the investment.
The investments
Got it.
strategy that you have to maintain your pensions. The great news was that we went into last year with 100% funding, or over 100% funding in both the non-uniform and the uniform. The bad news is we had a bad year. You went down 16%, so therefore it impacted that funding. Both of them are still 90% or above, which in state funding of municipal pensions is really well. The good news is we were 100% before last year. When you compare to like most pension plans that were not at 100% before last year, and we beat the market. The market was like 18% down, 17% down, depending on how you look at it. And we were right at about 16% down. So that's all the good news in that spot. Obviously, that's going to impact our MMO for next year. And reminder, an MMO is our minimum municipal obligation that we have that we need to contribute. My anticipation will go up pretty substantially. not as bad as it could have had we not done some things that we've done over the past couple of years. And some of those things are we've reduced our assumption rate over the last couple of years. We used to have an assumption rate of 7.5%. We brought it down to 6.5%. So obviously that helped by putting us in a spot when the returns are down, we actually do better. The projection from our financial advisor is that we're going to be at about a 6.25% return over the next 5 to 10 years. With that as a proposal, we feel pretty strongly that we're in a good spot for that. That means we'll probably be close to hitting what our assumption rate is in that way. And so those are that's the information. The unit of the police pension plan was down about we're underfunded about 1.3 million, and the municipal pension, the non-uniform plan was about 350,000 that we're short. So we'll be looking at it from a financial standpoint of how to start moving ourselves back. There'll be a requirement by the state, but then we'll be looking at it from our way.
Fund it fully and get back to 100%.
Well, it's interesting because with pensions, they're actually not really typically not fully funded because there's room in there for the growth of the portfolio. And the obligation is based on the future obligation. So you never really have a fully funded pension. Actuaries don't really design them to be fully funded in that way. Today, they're fully funded for the future obligation. So, I think like we're pretty close. I could probably bring more data with how funded typical plans.
My ears always go up when I hear someone say, "Oh, we have a minimum. Here's our minimum obligation, and we're going to meet it." We should always exceed our.
Well, we normally have, and we have, particularly in our non-uniform plan over the last several years, we probably put in an additional $500,000 or $600,000 than what we needed to put in. The uniform plan, we probably put in about 150,000, 200,000 over that time because it was because of the assumption rate issue that we wanted to adjust the assumption rate down to what we actually think we're going to be getting over a long haul. And so, obviously we want to be fully funded, but we also, because it's a long-term liability, how we get there is one of those things you kind of watch and you decide, and you're wanting the market to do part of it. And because, you have a market year like this year where you drop 16%, you don't want to immediately go put in to make up for what you lost this year and then turn around and have a 20% gain next year when your assumption is a 6% commitment rate, and so the problem is you probably have to go up 25% to replace the 16% that you lost, right? If you can't just have a 16% increase to make up a 16% deficit, but I think what I want to make the comment of, it's twofold. One is, yes, we're down, but the state doesn't even start considering you in trouble until you're below 90%. In fact, you're not even in trouble below 90%. You just move to, hey, you got to start taking some other steps. And then when you get below that, then they start having, what are you doing to fund and make sure
So
that
this
you're
state mandated guidelines as to
Oh,
where these
absolutely.
guardrails are. So
Yeah.
if you trip them, then you fall into another category.
Yeah, you can go into a level where, the state actually comes in and starts guiding your process of how you're managing your funds and starting to require, they have an opportunity to smooth over a certain period of time to get back to where you need to be and those kind of things. We've been going by market value, and we've been doing that since I've been here instead of a smoothing process, which has actually kept us closer to being fully funded. And we watch that pretty closely. The one that I'm watching that is also an issue, we have an unfunded issue, which almost every municipality I know has this issue, and it's what they call post-retirement benefits other than pension. We typically know that is like health insurance and things like that. We have a health insurance requirement for the police department from the time that they retire until the time that they hit 65 and can go on to Medicare. Medicare. And so we cover their insurance between that time. Well, an officer can retire, I think, at 55 and 25 years. So you would maybe have a 10-year period where you have an obligation. Right now, our obligation that will show on the books is about, I think it's about 3.5 million. For that, we've been funding that as we go. In other words, if an officer is retired, we're paying their health insurance each year while they're retired, kind of thing. I'm looking at that, whether we should change that and start looking at making a contribution to that, only because we're getting younger officers which means that there's more likely that they would be able to retire at 55. I got officers who are starting now and they're 22, 23, 24 years old. If they put their 25 years in, there's a very good likely that at 55, they're going to be saying, hey, I'm out of here. I mean, you got folks like Chris, who's our chief, who's been with the department for 31 years. You've got another officer who's been with us for 40. And so it's not that people don't stay longer and do that, but it is something that we want to look at. Do we want to at least fund a portion of that so that for future generations, we're in a spot where we're more healthy? And so that's probably something that I'll be bringing back to you and suggesting that we kind of do a study with to make a presentation to the board on at some point. So I just thought we would talk about those two things today, just because one, they're coming currently.
Speaking of the police, not to pick on them, I know they work under contract. Are they in a cycle now? Is their contract coming up or is it just settled? Or what's the terms of the contract?
The terms of this contract were 5 years.
Okay.
And we entered into it. I think next year is the last year of the contract, like 2025 will be the new contract year starting. Fiscal year. And so what we'll do during this year from a management side, we'll start putting together the things that we want to see happen in the contract so that when we get into 2024 and we start negotiations, we're ready.
Well, I was thinking about with the inflation rate and the cost of living adjustments, the triggers that are there, that probably is going to have a dramatic impact.
Yeah, the thing about the police contract, like typical other union contracts, is that, when you negotiate those, a lot depends on when you negotiate them, right? What your raises are. And and a lot of it's also dependent upon what the other departments around you are doing, because that's what they want to compare themselves to.
Sure.
And so as we look at that, the thing that I would say is, like, for example, since I've been here, I think the police have had a 3 to 3.5% increase every year. So it's been pretty much built into their contract that they've done that. So there were years where inflation was, 1%.
Yeah.
And so they were ahead.
And you had last year.
And then you had last year, which was the anomaly kind of that we've had in recent times. And so I think if we probably did it over the period of time and I had gone back and just did cost of living, they would probably be ahead.
Right.
Typically that's what I found. I haven't done that for the last go round here. I know
how you approach the negotiating table. Look, you're not playing catch up here. You guys are ahead. Yeah.
But again, when you've got somebody who's negotiating, like I know some other municipalities have and have just done 4 and 4.5 and 5% increases. Now I'm going to be actually negotiating not so much against what the economy is doing, but what other departments are doing. And so, but that's part of the game. I don't want to call
who does the negotiations, Steve?
For who?
or for the representing the township? Do we do that, or do we have a third party that does?
So in the past, we've done it in-house. Rich Sikora and I are going to be making a recommendation to the board that we bring in a third party
Okay,
to assist. I mean, I'm always involved in it. Usually, I should say, not always. There's some municipalities that the manager's not, but if you have a strong HR department, sometimes the HR department takes it. But you know, we're not in that, because like we're not big enough to have that. So it's usually myself, the solicitor, one or two board members,
Mhm.
and then we go in like that. But there's some changes that I think we'd like to make potentially that we would probably bring in a third party.
Back to the original topic, the financial, the hit to the pension. How much do we pay the financial advisor?
Well, you've got a couple different, I mean, there's,
You referenced one. I just was curious, because you know, the
Yeah,
PSERS,
yeah, what's going on in the,
you know, they
yeah,
were paying
state,
people
yeah.
like crazy amounts of
Well, they
money.
took off and then they had the employees paying in 7%. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't
I know,
probably.
I mean,
Right.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head. We use CBiz, if you're familiar with CBiz or not. They used to be INR. Well, INR was bought by CBiz. We've been using them since 2007 to manage our pensions. Their approach is a little different. They're what they call a passive manager versus an active manager. They use basically Vanguard funds
Index funds.
to fund the pension, and we've worked on some ways, I won't say to try to, you know, obviously they are always balancing the portfolio, and that's how they manage that to get the best growth. The other thing we've done and that the board has agreed to, and we've found that works well, is we get the state money in September, which means we normally make a deposit in October. Then we would also have our contribution. The board made a decision early on in my time here that we would start making our payments on a quarterly basis. And we did that so that we would get the best advantage of the market throughout the year. And up until last year, that worked real well. Obviously, last year, we would have been better off having waited till October to put the money in. But you got to make a decision that makes the sense for the long haul. And dollar cost averaging seemed to be the best way for the long haul. And so we've been doing that. And so like whatever we budget for the year, we do that. And the board, if the state contribution is greater than what that amount was that we budgeted, even though we wouldn't have to, the board has opted to actually add more money in, whatever the difference of the state contribution is versus what we actually owed at that point. And sometimes it's small. Last year, it was about $16,000 that was split between the two plans. Other times it's bigger. I don't know if that answers all your question, but.
oh, the question was, how much do we pay
I said, I don't know
He's
that.
gotta
I have
get
to
you.
get back
Oh,
to you
yeah,
on that.
okay. And is it also public knowledge, like what they're investing in? Like, because it's simple, right? Have they beat the S&P 500 or not? On an average, how long have they been our investment advisors?
They've been our investment advisors since 2008.
So I
I'm
guess.
just curious because,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, here's what I will say.
are they monkeying around with like a lot of, you know, different investments?
They're really.
No, they're
Really regulated, the pensions and what they're allowed to be invested in, they're highly regulated.
Yeah.
And it all gets looked at, by the OIG at some point. And basically, there's an annual minimum municipal obligation, and the actuary calculates that, and that's, I think what Steve was mentioning, when you can fund that, or you can fund more than that, sometimes people will fund less than that, but you really need to do at least the minimum state requirement, and then you can fund more. But they do come in, I think, every 2 years, don't they?
We get audited every
They
2 years.
actually get audited.
I'm missing my question.
No, I know what you're asking.
My question is, how much are we paying the investment advisor?
I'll have to
And
find that.
and what is our return?
And I will say,
versus, like, market return? What are they doing for us? Is it valuable
So like I shared, like I tried to share this time, and I think this has been the standard. We were a percentage point higher or less lost than what the market was last year. And so that, I mean, and we have benchmarks that we compare to, and I obviously depends on which benchmark you pick, right?
Which would then say we were a percentage point lower than the market when it was up, right?
No, we were actually,
Ahead of the market?
we've been actually ahead of the market in those years, usually about the same amount. You're not going to have, because it's passive type of a management, you're not going to have those years where you beat the benchmark by 10 basis points or,
Nobody's
what,
looking for that, because that's a recipe for disaster.
right.
But I guess, yeah, can we get a report, or can I find on?
Yeah, so
what
it's,
our investments are
sure,
and what our returns? are?
I can get you that.
It's on it too, so that will come out.
Is it?
It is.
It is, they audit our pension funds every year as well.
Oh.
I think I know what you want. I will share with you documents that we have. If that's not what you want, you tell me what you want,
Yeah, that'd be great.
and I will get you what you
Don't
want.
put anything together, or just send me the document.
No, that's exactly what I'll do.
We'll keep you busy.
Yeah, you'll have plenty of time on your own with them.
I'm happy to read.
Yeah, no, I'll,
Take care of the insomnia.
Yeah.
yeah, I will try to get you what I have. I have better documentation going back the last year or so. They've gone electronic and I've missed a couple, but I'll make sure you get everything.
All right, thank you.
Good. Steve, before we go on to new business, one of the other topics I thought about, and I know you've talked about in the prior meetings, the expected decline in new permits.
Yep.
And the township build out. I'm wondering if there's any new information, anything with respect to the large parcel that's past Mastardi's on Route 3, and what's going on with that parcel, if anything.
Yeah, so they've come in for a land development plan. It's fairly small. It's an 1,800 square. I think it's 1,800 square foot building. It's going to be a VFW type of building on the lot that's there by the memorial. That is all that I know of as if you're talking about land development.
Yes.
There was a hotel that came in, I think it was supposed to be like a residence inn, prior to COVID. What I've heard is that the operator of the hotel has backed out and said that they're not willing to come at this time. So that may or may not change. I don't, because land development kind of goes a lot longer than like once the plans are recorded.
Yeah.
That,
Then they
I
move.
mean,
Yeah.
that holds.
What about, just past Astartes, there is the light, and if you turn right, you go into a road that leads to nowhere.
Right, that's the parcel that I'm talking about, that
Oh,
whole
I thought you were
parcel.
talking about the memorial there.
Well, I am that whole area is one owner.
Oh,
That, so from the edge of Mastardi's, actually almost to the end of the township is one owner.
Yeah.
They've developed the area where the Goodwill and the district court is. They've done that. They've done the memorial. They want to add this 1,800 square foot building, and then they have and then they kind of coming off. I think it was where the light was, but I'm not 100% sure. It may have been a little bit further down. Coming off, there was a spot that where the hotel was going to be. But that, like I said,
pull back, because there's, at the light, if you turn right, there's gates there, like
Yeah.
a fencing. The road continues past that.
yes.
So what does that road go to? What was the plan there, or what happened?
There was.
Oh, never mind. Never mind.
Yeah, let me give you the very short version of a very big issue. So the developer there came in with a plan that was kind of going to do, I think his intention was to kind of do like a town center kind of an approach. Equus also came in, actually BPG at the time came in with a plan to do town center. They ended up in court fighting over that because the developer thought there couldn't be two town centers in the town. And so, and this is very high end, like, and there was a lot more to it, but they ended up having a settlement. Anyway, they got to where they are. They chose not to act. BPG did act and has built and really done what they've done. The developer's chosen not to. The developer would say the reason they didn't develop was there wasn't store down that end of town. And so that was the reason why they didn't do it. And there wasn't. There has, we've since spent $33 million and put sewer in at that end of town. And so we're moving in that direction. I suspect over the next some number of years, I don't want to, I don't want to go on the record of saying it's going to be 5 years or it's going to be 10 years. But it's what I would say is that as the economy returns and there is some sense of what people want, is it office space? I would argue that office space is not the prime today. I've got empty offices sitting over here. So, I mean, part of that development was supposed to be office space and retail. Both of those are not like heavy hitters today in that market, unless you happen to be in the right spot. So I don't know what the developer is going to come back in. And I also know that there's probably not necessarily an appetite from the board right now to make that all residential. So, those are the kind of thoughts that are going to.
Is it zoned as residential or is it? Zoned?
It's zoned mixed. There's some residential back there. I think it's like what our R5 zoning is, which has a variety of, like, a lifestyle village is how it's zoned. So there would be commercial and residential mixed together.
But
But
obviously there's a market for 55 plus. That's what I always thought was going to go in there.
well, there is, I mean, and this is what they've come in with and haven't taken any action on. There was a plan for a 55 plus where the golf course is. I think it was supposed to be like 400 units. And again, the developer was in before us, stopped midway through, so I don't know where that all heads going forward. The developer has lots of land in the township. They own that. The same developer owns that side of the street that owns the golf course, that also owns the very
The old
center,
firehouse.
the old firehouse in the very center of 252 and 3, that corner where the cleaners is and all of that.
Stores.
And they also own a piece over on Gradyville Road. So it's the same developer that really owns what's open and what we would argue is probably ready for redevelopment.
So there's no, circling
No.
back to the original question, I forgot the answer.
There's nothing really pending.
There's nothing really pending, and you have to remember the developer has the right. I mean, a landowner has the right, just like you do. You buy your house and, you may choose to fix it up. You may choose not to fix it up. You may buy a piece of land. You may choose to put a house on it. You may choose not to put a house on it, and it's the same piece there. I mean, he's a landowner. He has certain rights. He pays a certain amount of taxes on it based on what he has done or hasn't done. And so, that would be that. I knowing what he's wanting to do with the addition of the VFW hall, my guess is part of that road would be opened up that you're talking about.
And so just in general for permits in the township, are they expected to be down this year versus last year?
Well, I think that BPG is going, or Equus, I forget what they call which part of which group now. I suspect they will be less than what we've had in past years, but not, I think the following year will be the year that we have the significant drop.
What about transfer taxes?
So we have the 66 new townhomes that are coming in there on the Ellis Preserve. That's really the only new development that's in town in regards to residential that would be potentially transfer. I mean, obviously, if Equus or Madison were to sell off, or Avenues were to sell off, or and now they're not the Avs or the station at Newtown or whatever they are. so if any of those were to sell, obviously that would be a potentially large in transfer tax. I would say that what I don't know and what I'm watching closely is what happens with individual homeowners.
Yeah.
I've been suspecting it was going to slow down. I think it's slowed down some. The biggest challenge is there's not a lot on the market. And so that there's still a drive for people to want to live here. So when something does come on, it doesn't necessarily stay on very long. There's some things that are staying on longer. So I don't know if it's location, like there's a couple of houses I've driven by and I've gone, boy, that's on the market a long time for Newtown Square. But I don't have a good answer. I mean, if I look at it online, I look at it and I go, it looks pretty nice, but I haven't gone and checked it out to see, is there a hidden something underneath, or is it just that, it happens to be located not the best spot in town,
Moving on to new business. I'll kind of throw this out to our two members here as to whether or not we want to get into this goals discussion with two members missing, or do you want to table it? That way everybody gets a chance to listen to what other folks are thinking in terms of just direction. So I'm looking. I understand, but then it'll be, if we make some decisions, then other folks will say, well, what is it that we want to do? Or we were going to do that and that type of thing.
What were
So
our goals last year?
we did not have specific goals set last year. The question is whether or not we want to do that now at this meeting, or do we want to table it until March when we have presumably our two missing members.
Today, but we can talk about it,
Okay,
right? I mean.
all right.
We can,
Well, we
can't,
could
I,
talk
I,
about the general areas where we think we want to focus maybe,
Yeah.
and then bring back.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll throw it out to you, Alex, in terms of, have you thought about something you'd like to take ownership of?
yeah, the pension thing, the finance, like, I'd like to know a lot more about how much we pay people,
Advisors.
and stuff, we have that for the, one thing I was thinking of, for the, like, a permit department, like, we source that out. At least when they come in to inspect my house, it's not Newtown Square people I've had recently, electrical guys and foundation guys looking at my, are not Newtown Square people. And I don't know how much we're paying for those services, we need them. And then the same goes for anybody that's an outside contractor. I'm curious, like.
So I'm going to ask you to help me flesh that out a little bit so I can help you kind of get a direction. Are you in regards to, because we have a lot of outside contractors.
That's the thing, yeah. And
Yeah.
some of them, it seems to me, it's almost like it's, we've just had them for so long. Like, is it, when I hear them, they come up, I don't know who does, for instance, who does, I mean, is it the same companies all the time?
Engineer just got.
An engineer just got replaced, that's, that I like to see that, because,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
new
So
perspective.
what we can do for you, and if you'll give me probably not to the next meeting to do this, because I think it's going to take me a little longer just to
next
do
week
it.
it'd be fun.
But we can start pulling together a list of outside contractors. We did that for the board of supervisors, so I can probably go back to that list. I just need to update it. I will tell you, like, the inspector that's at your house, that inspector's probably been on board for about 1.5 years. That's a new inspector.
I was just using that.
No, I mean, just giving you an example. I guess the question, like, when I think of an outside contractor, I also think of Republic, who does our recycling. Is that, and that's why I'm asking, like, how you're, yeah, okay.
We have a township lawyer that we pay.
Solicitor.
Solicitor, he's not an employee of the township.
Correct.
Right, we have, like I said, I'm sure we pay insurance, companies.
Yeah, no, we do.
No,
Is there a board member that is responsible for the third-party contractors, kind of, or is it?
So remember that I mean, the board only can make a decision if at least three people make the decision, right? I mean, that's,
Oh, okay.
so we are, as the staff, responsible for maintaining certain data. I work with the solicitor very closely, obviously on all contracts, they're reviewed by the solicitor. And a lot of times helps us negotiate through the process, depending on what it is that we're getting into. But I don't know that a board member has taken responsibility to say, I'm responsible for all third-party
I
contracts.
just want Alex to step on somebody's toe.
No,
I'm also sensitive as you open this could be a Pandora's box, as to whether or not is all of the third-party fees that are paid.
yeah,
Is that a matter of public record? Or
Yes.
is it or is it a mixed bag?
no, so first of all, any fee that the township pays is always a matter of public record. I mean, it's a requirement, right? We can't pay somebody and not tell you what we're paying them. In
Got it.
fact, you will see on their bills all the time what we're paying people. I will say remember that in local government, there's two methods of having third-party contractors. There are some contract type of things that are considered professional services. Our solicitor, our engineer, even the
You're thinking the insurance
inspector,
broker.
inspector, the insurance broker are all considered professional services. The
I thought Republic earlier.
Oh, I mean, okay, so, but like recycling and even I would argue
Landscaping.
like our landscaping contract, or a lot of those things, or most of those things are required to go out to bid. And it's a bid process. We're required to accept the lowest responsible bidder.
I see, so you have two categories. You
So
have
we have two-
professional services, and then
Correct.
you have where you've got a competitive bid.
Correct. So the board has the discretion, and I'm going to use it that way, to appoint their solicitor, to appoint their engineer,
Yeah.
to appoint those other positions. We have, other than really, other than the solicitor, almost every time we've done some kind of search. Even for our auditor, we did a search when we did the process. And again, that's something that the board could just appoint. It doesn't have to, they don't, we've gone out, we've asked for, people to come back. It doesn't necessarily mean we take the lowest
Right, we're not
one.
bound. Right.
We pick the one that makes the most sense to do what we're asking them to do. If that helps. But I can get, and that's why I wanted to understand how broad you wanted to go. And I hear you're wanting to go pretty broad. And so I'll look at.
Not because anything needs to change, it's just, it's. nice-
You want to understand the process.
It's nice to have that information. It's like at one point a year or two ago, I don't remember, we put together a list, or you guys put together a list of the properties in the township and which ones were non-profit entities. And that's good public information to
Sure.
know, as our role here is to advise the supervisors on financial matters. They don't have to take our advice, right? It doesn't matter to me whether they do or they don't, but I would like to be able at some point to go back to them with something, say, hey, we found you could save $1 or $2 here by doing this and that, which they could reject. At least then we're doing what we're supposed to. I mean, every single one of these meetings is more like we get a financial report, then we talk about stormwater tax fee, and then we move on to the next meeting and do it all over again. It would be nice to do financial digging.
Yep.
And
Yeah, something we haven't touched.
otherwise, I
Yeah.
don't understand.
Yeah.
Sort of like, what's the purpose of our
Yeah.
committee here?
Yeah, no, I think that you're making a good point. And, these are the kind of things that I think if you get into, that it's a value add to the community. Even if the board chooses not to take an action, we've at least reviewed it and we can say it's been reviewed and, here's where we are.
Yeah, or we could go back to the board and say, hey, we reviewed your list of contractors, we couldn't find anything, we don't have any recommendations, good.
Yep.
But that helps the board too, because then they can
Sure.
say to the community, hey, we had a separate meeting look at. that."
Yep.
So that would be my goal for this.
Right, I guess for my goal is continue with the stormwater.
Yeah, I mean, we have a,
Fair tax.
yeah, we can spin that wheel a little more. I think both Lisa and I, because we're so far into the details, I'm thinking what we'll really address for 2023 is coming forward with recommendation, and most importantly, we're gonna have a public face-off, a series of communications, town hall meeting. We're gonna have to communicate the information and financial information, even though people will kind of resist that, but I think we have to put it out there so that we can put forward in good conscience to the Board of Supervisors for 2024, this is what's in front of you.
Got it.
I don't know if that's specific enough, but I really feel the public end of what has to happen.
I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, but I think you.
Has there been any
got-
reaction to the newsletter that George did that went out to the public?
I've not heard any personal
Okay.
reaction. I've heard a couple people say they enjoyed the articles and those kind of
Right, they
things.
found it entertaining,
But
we
I
haven't
don't-
hit him with the numbers.
But I don't know that,
If the last paragraph had been, and this will cost you X per month, then you would have got the reaction.
yeah. Well, and I think that if you remember, our goal was to kind of take the year to set up and
Yeah.
start giving the information so that when we do share the numbers, there's something behind the numbers other than just, we need $40 million to stop stormwater. We wanted to be able to say, here's, we'll be able to say, here's some information you can look at that shows to you why we need $40 million to do stormwater.
But one of the things just to take this further and to keep the momentum going, I thought about whether or not it's I'm not sure the cycle, the spring or the summer newsletter.
We're kind of going into stormwater. So-
Yeah, okay, so what we'll do is Lisa and I will, in terms of goals, we will stay committed on both the financial aspect as well as the communication aspect for 2023 as a goal on stormwater. Thank you, John. We'll now move into old business. And this is where, yeah, and then I know we talked about the map. I don't know if Steve's got that ready.
You don't have the map attached.
I think I could
ahead.
probably talk
Can you
about
pull
that
up,
for this meeting, 'cause
yeah.
I think we're gonna open it and then we're
Yeah,
probably gonna have
Just go
to get into
type
it
in
for the next.
website, stormwater MS4, it'll pull up.
So, well, he was looking for that. I'll just give a quick update. So we met, myself, Steve, and Ed. And really, we said this at the last meeting, we're trying to simplify everything now because we've sort of got the bird's eye view of everything. Now we're trying to really focus on what it is we need and what we want.
Go right there, go click on that.
So in our last meeting, it
Right there.
became really clear that, fee is gonna be off the table for right now because of this, court matter that is going on. So we're really left, with the tax, and you can charge either, a tax based on a flat rate per parcel or based on assessed value. So those are our options. The need is really related to the MS4 requirements that the township is obligated to perform to remediate these issues.
What do you
There's,
say, Les?
So we're gonna get Steve to,
I don't even know what that
Yeah.
means.
here we
Yes.
go.
so
Yeah, you may want to
MS4
turn around, Alex. This is pretty interesting.
Yes, perfect timing with the map.
There we go. Why don't
So
you,
MS4.
why don't you, we're gonna do an MS4 for the group.
So real quick, that the whole concept behind MS4 is saying that all of our streams go somewhere. They go down and they connect to rivers, then connect to the ocean, and in some cases connect to bays, like the Chesapeake Bay. And depending on where you are within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you have where your water goes. We happen to be an area where most of our water ends up in the Delaware River, and then flows down into out into the ocean that way. But one of the requirements that the state has come back with is saying that stream restoration needs to be done to reduce the amount of sediment, and particularly off of roadways. And when you think about sediment off of roadways, we do street sweeping on a regular basis. We sweep our streets, and we don't sweep our streets just to keep them clean. That's not really the reason why we sweep streets. I mean, some people assume we're just trying to clean streets. It really is to reduce the sediment that goes into the waterways. And that's the main thing that we're after. And so when, when the street sweeper goes up, it's picking up grit and grime that the car picks up and drops back down when you drive down our roadways. And so, sometimes it's the salt, and sometimes it's all of those things that don't get dissolved into the water. And so we're looking at ways to
sediment and it's pollutants.
Got it. And so we're trying to reduce that, what goes into our streams. That's the whole idea behind MS4, is really how do we reduce what's going into the water system that becomes our drinking water, that becomes the water that are, that the fish and and all of that survive in. And so we have a requirement in a MS4. We have an individual permit as a township, and our permits for 5 years, and we have a certain amount of period of time in which we need to, that 5-year period, we have a certain amount of sediment reduction that we have to achieve. And it's 10% of the overall sediment production that goes into our streams. And so when the engineer, our prior engineer, originally did this, and we started talking about it, we said, what's the way to go about this and really kind of do this in an easy way? And so the idea was, if we go on township property and do stream restoration, we don't have to go out and get easements, or we don't have to get agreements with property owners to do stream restoration on their property. And, should the individual owner be paying for some of that and going through that challenge? So for the first 5 years, we were going to do it all on township property. However, I got talking with the engineers, both the old engineer and our new engineer, and I said, tell me, if we do this, if we don't start at the head of the stream, are we impacting potentially what we do downstream when we either go back and do the stream head, or if we don't ever do the stream head, what's coming in because it may have issues? And they said, actually, that's true. And so we're going back and we're looking at the map and saying, maybe we should go back and have a minor adjustment and do the same amount of stream bank restoration, but start at the head of the stream instead of just doing on township property. And so that's what we're looking at. You'll see on Fox's Run, I think that's right there, going there through Greer Park. There's where the red is, and it goes through Brookside Park. We're looking at trying to do all of that up to the head, which is like right across, it's right next to 252, kind of right across from the Ellis Preserve area there, and do that. The same consideration is looking at Reese's Run. I've been in contact and having conversations with the folks from Lissitor, and then we'll be having conversations with the folks from SAP to do that run along there, where that directly impacts the stream. And so those are the two projects that we've been talking about when we talk about MS4.
The difference between like white parcel and MS4.
Okay, so certain areas don't count as drainage areas because of either one, they have had significant amount of water, stormwater management. So like if you look on the map and you see the green dots, that's all stormwater management practices. Those are individual homes that have done this. And remember, I think this map was done 2 years ago, I think. But those were the places where individuals had done stormwater projects. But the green is the area based on the contour of the land that leans and runs to the stream, that there's actually impact, that most of it's directed towards township roads and where the township road water runs to, and how the water coming across those areas impact those streams. And there's a lot better explanation about it that an engineer can give you than what I can give you. But if you think about it, it's typically areas where the water from our roads either goes off of the road and impacts a stream, or the water in the neighborhood is coming off and impacting a stream in some way. And so that's how that is determined.
And so if we were to tax, we would only tax the portion.
No, we would, so what would happen, and I think John had brought this up, in areas where they've done stormwater management, there would be at least some kind of, if a homeowner has put in something and done a stormwater management, there would be at least some kind of reduction in the fee. It doesn't mean they wouldn't have any fee, but they would be, and I say, I'm going to call it a tax. I don't want to miss it. There would be some reduction in the tax based off of that. I think that's what you're asking.
Steve, the projection in terms of the dollar cost under this permit, is that something that was developed? Did the state issue that number, or was it something that was devised by the engineers?
The state issued the requirement that we reduce by 10%. That was the state issued
So
requirement.
they don't issue a dollar amount.
They did
set
not
up
issue a
percentage
dollar
basis.
amount.
So
And
then that translates by the engineer into, based upon
Here's-
particular.
there's a formula that says if you restore X number of feet of land, X number of feet of stream, you reduce sediment by X. And so whether it's real or not, until you get done the project, you don't know that answer, right? And I mean, so I want to be,
It's an engineering.
it's an engineering formula. And so then they'll go back and they'll measure what we're doing afterwards. And they'll say you've accomplished that 10% or you haven't. Then we'll get a new permit and they'll tell us we need to reduce another 10% or we need to reduce another so much. My guess is that this will go on for probably the rest of my life on this earth.
But why not, so I'm just selfishly thinking about, so I got, Darby Creek cuts through my property.
Yep.
And I paid a fortune to actually move Darby Creek. I had to go to the state and everything 10 years ago because it was eroding a bank, and I had to flatten the bank and put rocks in and all that. I'd be happy to have the township come in and restore the banks as a private property owner
Sure.
in here, and I'll bet you all my neighbors would too. So, I mean, why, you said you only wanted to do the public stuff, but why not go to private, say, can we tear up your yard?
Well, I mean, here's the
Without my
thing.
permission?
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, and the question
Here you go.
becomes,
It's saying, "Damn,
Ready
it
for the
cost me a
budget?"
fortune."
no, and it is expensive. And so you understand kind of the cost. When I say it's a couple $1 million to do what we have to do, that probably doesn't surprise you.
No.
Yeah, and so the thing that I think that the township's not necessarily responsible to go in and fix every stream bank. It's responsible to make sure it gets done. There's a difference, right? So we're not financially, we're not necessarily, but we don't have to come in and say to you, we're going to come in and do this. What we are responsible to do is make sure that we reduce this sediment coming in. And so it may be that we look at going forward where we say, we're going to come up with almost like a private public partnership you have a responsibility as a landowner that has a stream on your property. And so the township's going to come in. What if we fund half of it and you fund half of it and we'll come do what needs to be done? That's probably what we're going to look at going forward and what we're going to look at when we're going onto private land, versus coming in and saying the township's just going to take care of this. Because if you think about what you had to do on your little, and I realize it's not little for what you did, but when in comparison to the whole township, it's a very little part. You multiply that by all the other stream. I mean, you think that number's huge.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's how I think we're going to approach this. And so the township's perspective and the township's point of view has been, let's tackle the areas first that the township owns before we start asking for landowners to do something that the township itself hasn't done. So that was kind of our spot. However, when I started having the conversation with the engineers and they're saying the best place is to start at the mouth of where these streams or the start of where these streams are, then it makes sense. And so, maybe we do enter into an agreement with the landowner that we'll fund X amount, you fund X amount, or, however that works, because look at this, there's a ton of work to do. And if you remember, you all may not remember, but there's been a lot of talk about planting 1,000 trees in the township. That whole piece is part of this plan as well. And so to help get to our number of sediment reduction, we're wanting to plant that 1,000 trees. Well, the 1,000 trees have to be planted somewhere in that green area for it to count. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, where did that lead?
So that left us that the 3 projects that have been designated, the total cost estimated for those 3 projects is $2.5 million over 3 years. So what we want to do is make a recommendation to the board that we start to assess this tax now, and we have to come up with an amount for each year. And if we can keep that tax in place, we can accumulate the funds to, number one, get through this first MS4 project, and then that would keep going, so it wouldn't be a one-time thing. It wouldn't necessarily be per a set price per year either. It would be every year, what do we need? What is the tax going to be? To raise $1 million, what we know right now is that we would charge a flat tax per parcel of $179 per year, or we would have an increase if we did the tax based on assessed values of 60%. And we've run those models and we have tables and charts so we can show where those numbers come from. So we're really talking, if it's a flat tax, it's $15 per month. If it's if it's a tax based on assessed value, we also know where that lands on the residents, how we could show how that falls out.
Demographics, yeah.
Who would pay that burden. And then, of course, the credits for people who have stormwater, which is required by the state. So yeah, we want to get, so I think the next step is what amount are we trying to raise? And then are we going with flat tax or assessed value?
As a board, you'd have to get Rich involved in this, because my concern is no way you're going to collect the taxes.
Guys, this is off the table. We're planning for implementation of the revenue generation in 2020.
Okay, because by the time all the lawsuits get worked out, I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean,
Oh, I
some people are gonna, and especially if you start talking about giving people credits, I don't even know how you begin to set up that program of, it's gonna cost us so much money just to implement. Flat fee seems easiest, but least fair.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's,
Yeah.
Somebody that has a small parcel paying the same as someone who has a gigantic parcel. Seems least fair, easiest to implement. But
Right.
then when you start talking about credits, you have people like me running in going, whoa, hold on, I get credit for this and that, my property. And it becomes- I don't.
But you could look at it in another way, which is that the MS4 project benefits the whole township equally, so that every parcel should pay. The tax exempts will be excluded, of course, because this is a tax, not a fee, but it's really a nominal impact when we look at that. I know from the outside perspective, it's not insignificant, but as far as,
179?
but as far as the dollars associated with the tax exempt properties, it's not really that much.
179 to us might not be, a lot, but I'm just thinking you could just put a tax on somebody. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I would.
Yeah.
A lawyer.
That's,
We wanna
now you know the dilemma.
Questions, right, these are.
Not, again,
We need
and
to minimize chance of this all being held up.
Yeah, and
Court.
one option the board has at its disposal, there is room in our millage today, just to make it part of the general fund millage and just to allocate the dollars, just like we allocate dollars to the police department, we allocate dollars to stormwater. The advantage of having a stormwater tax / fee or whatever is that those dollars can't be spent somewhere else. And so that if we get to a point that we're no longer having to do this, it doesn't just get absorbed. There's always the pain, right? If we go from 0 to 179 or whatever that number is in 1 year, that's a huge pain, right? For folks to experience in 1 year. Once you've experienced that pain and you're doing it, let's face it, we all absorb that, right? And it just becomes part of the norm. And then once it becomes part of the norm, you forget about it, right? Where if it is specific related to something that, for example, stormwater, if the stormwater management piece, and we're no longer required to do MS4, I would argue it goes away. And it doesn't, that's the reason why you might choose to do it for that purpose versus just sticking in the general fee or general tax and doing it. Again, there's all kinds of political / or even just, appearance wise of looking how it is done, things you have to look at and what's the best way to do it.
That's why communication is key, because yes, people will say, okay, tax exempts aren't going to participate and they have the most property. But then when you really look at the impact, I think it's like a $2 per parcel savings. It's not dramatically financially relevant. It is definitely from a perception perspective, but that's where the communication has to fill in those gaps.
I'd love to get the perspective of Leonard and his group on this, because if you absorb it into the general tax, which would be the easiest thing to do, right? Then you now raise the tax, we either have to cut somewhere else or it becomes part of a tax increase, and that's what an elected board of supervisors has to deal with politically. Would they prefer maybe it just be a separate thing and say, hey, this is something that not us raising the tax.
so this is.
And I
where-
think that your job is to present options, not necessarily present the final answer.
Yeah, I don't see us making a recommendation. We think this is the best option because of that issue.
Well, here's what I would
This
say.
is
I
not
think
our
you do make a
recommendation.
recommendation that we should be trying to fund it. I think you would all say that that's important. So that's your recommendation. And then you would say, here are 3 options about how to fund it that we think might work. Kind of
So
thing. That's what I would
This
say.
gets back to, and folks may come out, yell and scream, they may not come out, yell and scream. But to put real numbers out there with 7 digits, in a setting, in a town hall, in an open setting, where if people see it, they become aware of it, that this is going to be discussed, this is pending. And the implication in terms of whether or not it's built into the tax base in terms of the millage, or it becomes a separate fee. Will that attract enough of an audience for them to come out and voice and to gain information, gain knowledge, and voice their perspective on this. Does the supervisors want that? Or do they want to do the analysis and make the recommendation? This is what we're going to do.
We're at the point where we can already go to the board.
I think we
The
are.
next meeting, and you get up there and you say. "Here's
This is
what
where we
could
are."
do. Here are the solid numbers. You give them the solid
Yeah.
numbers. Don't beat around the bush. We need X million of dollars over the next several years. We could do this or that or that. This is what our committee is looking at. Do you have any, guidance or just to put it out there in the public? I don't know. It seems like they keep pushing this
Yeah.
can down the road.
And I think the key is to work with the supervisors to ensure that they're ready for prime time with this discussion. So we need to make sure that they're ready to receive a
Right.
7-digit number at the township.
Well, they're aware of this. It's set
Right,
well
but I
into
mean,
seven,
the public.
but in the public domain.
Yeah.
We're in public domain
Right.
now.
Correct.
Yeah, but the awareness is very low. Given our exit. Right. Yeah, there's crickets out there. That's what I'm getting at. When you put the seven,
On the office.
when you put the 7 digits out there in a forum that, like the township newsletter, that's going to attract attention.
I'm not a politician. So I would just throw it out there. I mean, it is what it is. And I'm not really sensitive to those other issues. It's 7 digits. We need to raise it. And there's multiple ways to do it. And we're not going to make a recommendation, but we're continuing to look at it and.
It's not, yeah, we're
Does the
not.
board have any further guidance?
I think it would be helpful to have one of the supervisors attend next meeting if they can. I know that.
I think Alex is actually right. I think we want to flip the way. I think we want to be before them because here's the thing. A supervisor coming back and telling you what I think is.
Yeah, they're not-
Equally is having one of you make a decision to say.
Not.
Move forward for something. And the rest of you.
We're just going to have an information session. And we're not asking, no one's asking anyone to make a decision or make a recommendation. We just need an information sharing session.
Well, I think you do an information sharing session and then say to them, I'm sorry, I have my mic off. I think you do an information sharing session and then you ask them, do you have any feedback from us? Do you want us to get you other information? Do you want us to do anything else for you?
We can do that at the next public comment of the board.
Yeah, we need to make sure he's on board with where you're headed.
Yeah, I think now, what's the protocol on that? Could Ed and I as the subcommittee meet with the chair or chair Leonard and just not, give him some of this?
Yeah.
information? It's all been discussed.
I mean, let's say this, Leonard probably is one of the 3 people that watches this meeting, so my guess is he's aware. And so, because I know he comments to me about certain things about it, so I know he pays attention to what's going on here. But yes, you can do that, and we can talk about how to do that.
All right, so Steve, we'll leave that to you to communicate through. Do we get his input and then we can plan for which board of supervisors meeting we'll have this information sharing.
Yep.
Any other old business? Items for the next agenda? Are there any other topics that people want to put out there?
Back on,
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz.
the goals.
Goals, right, we'll finish the goals. We lost our public comment. I don't know if there's any other public comment online, anything. Great. We are adjourned. It is